was only 20, and while I was curious, I didn't feel horrified about getting back in it. No, that was probably typical of most of the young single 7 foot tall, bulletproof and immortals like me. But some of the married blokes were obviously concerned, and the senior people were bloody concerned. And so we were grounded while they tried to sort out, and again they knew what had happened, but not exactly why. And after some months on the ground, we resumed the conversion for the second time, or really the third start. And then we graduated off conversion course, and you came off course as a DCAT captain, so you could be a captain in the training area and a co-pilot outside the training area. And then fairly rapidly, as you're exposed to Army and Navy support and Air Force support, you gain skills in doing more than just flying the aircraft around. And then every so many months there'd be a bunch of individual unit training exercises with the Army and ourselves, so 1 or 2 aircraft and a company or a battalion, but one company at a time. Culminated in multi-unit, multi-formation exercises at Shoalwater Bay, the training area north of Rockhampton and Yeppoon. When we got to Phuoc Tuy province in Vietnam, we looked back at Shoalwater Bay training area, and there was a remarkable resemblance in the topography and a fair bit of the tree cover and so on. And you know, lots of mangrove swamps and rivers, mountains and heavily clad jungle, different jungle, but the flora was similar enough. It was a very, very good introduction to joint operations in a Southeast Asian setting. And then by the time you got to Vietnam, you'd probably done at least one. And then the squadron had the 9th Squadron in Vietnam had about 36 pilots or thereabouts at that stage. And all the ground crew and air crew rotated through the squadron over the years so that you kept a reasonable balance of experience. And of course, unforeseen events kept on interfering with that smooth flow, but it worked pretty well. And so even though you might become a CCAT or even a BCAT at 5 Squadron, when you went to 9 Squadron, you started right back at the beginning, which was, most people thought, a very sensible way of doing it. So you go out as a co-pilot, and then you'd graduate up the risk level of, or importance of the various missions. And so the missions went from, say, Albatross 01 was the call sign of the lead aircraft, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Albatross 08 if it was a big push. And then there were the Bushranger 71 and 72, with a third one that was kept on standby back at Nui Dat. And so you graduated through those 2 streams. Everyone gets checked out and flies on the Bushrangers, but most would only fly as co-pilot, including me. And then the others would end up being a slick captain or a Medevac captain, including me. And then some junior blokes would end up being flight lead in either the Bushrangers or the slicks, and if he's a second tourist, probably both. And you'll end up on the slick routine, and because of supply and demand, and probably I was in the middle of the slight kink in the supply of pilots and crewmen, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, got a reasonably early captaincy and a reasonably early flight lead. But everyone flew all the missions, just depended on the level of responsibility. Late March 1970 to early May 71. So your father got there not long before I left, and I think I checked a month or so ago and I'd flown with him at least once or twice. And he was fairly senior flight lieutenant at that stage, I think, or he might have, or he might have been promoted to squadron leader when he went into the squadron. I can't remember.
Yeah, well, he'd been in the Air Force for quite a while before that. So.
Yeah, but I distinctly remember him. And then we crossed paths occasionally after that over the years, but then I left and so did he. Well, I think he left before I did. Fire Squadron was a really good grounding, and pretty much Fire Squadron, well, it was the feeder squadron, so it trained the Army and everybody else back in Australia, and 9 Squadron in Vietnam looked after it. So we were based in Vung Tau, Cape Saint-Jacques, near the mouth of the Mekong, and about 70k or whatever it is, maybe 100k southeast of Saigon, and it was a French Riviera resort, 1930s style, and it was also apparently the R&R centre for the local Viet Cong. There was a truce in town because no one wanted to ruin their days off, and it was really good that 9 Squadron was there right next to the logistics supply, and every morning at dawn 4 slicks and 2 gunships would head north for Nui Dat, which is about 15 minutes away up in the province, and then they'd come back at dusk unless there was a war going on, and they'd probably stay back. And at that stage the Americans would have 1 Huey at Nui Dat on constant immediate standby for Medevac. And then when the Americans started pulling out in late 1970, 9 Squadron took over formal responsibility for Medevac. 9 Squadron never stopped doing Medevac the whole time, but we took over the formal responsibility. And so in June or July 1970, John Burns, my instructor and now the unit instructor on his second tour in Vung Tau, he and I were sent by the CO, Peter Coy, to fly with the 45th Medevac Company out of Long Bin up near Benoit, near sort of Benoit, Saigon triangle. And we were to learn how the Yanks did Medevac, come back and make recommendations. And it was an eye-opener. And while if I was American I'd do it that way, it wasn't the way we thought that we would do it. So they were unarmed Red Cross, and that's how they did their business. And Burnsy looked at it and said, no, it's not the way we did it, and I quite agreed with what John said. And that we were already doing it with slicks, and we'd already modified the slicks so that we could do it. Not the way the Yanks did it, but just off our own bat. And any Australian chopper could do a Medevac. And our crewmen were first aid trained, but when we took over responsibility, we just kept a standard slick, no Red Crosses, kept all the arms, and if it wasn't urgent, the dedicated chopper would do it, particularly at night, because it would be the only Huey up at Nui Dat, and there'd be another one immediate standby back at Vung Tau as a backup, but and that's how it was before the Yanks took over. But then we decided we kept the standby at Vung Tau and then placed an immediate standby at the Red Earth Regimental Aid Post on the helipad at Nui Dat. And so the crew slept up there overnight or just hung around there during the day. But if a slick was out on a mission and was close, that time being the essence, the slick could go in and did it, and often did. And that went on the whole 5.5 years that 9 Squadron was there.